Hi, good morning or good afternoon or good evening, depending on where you are at in the world. My name is Len Hurstein. I'm the CEO of Manage Camp Inc., and I want to welcome you to another edition of the Brand Manage Camp webcast series. As you may know, we produce an annual conference called the Brand Manage Camp Conference. We're currently in the process of planning our 14th annual iteration of this event to be held September 15th and 16th in Las Vegas, and we should have the agenda set within the next couple of weeks. So in the meantime, if you want to see what we're all about and who our speakers are from last year, you can always go to brandmanagecamp.com, and that'll be updated with the new speakers in a couple of weeks. But right now, you can see everything that we did last year. But in the meantime, we are super excited about today's webcast, and we do these periodically. We have these great opportunities to share information that come up, and today's is something that we're really excited about. It's called Getting the Most Out of the Data You Already Have. And it's going to be presented by our good friends from iModerate, and specifically Adam Rosso, who's the Chief Marketing Officer over there. And he's going to be showing us how we can start looking at the data we already have in terms of transforming it into the actual actionable intelligence that we actually need to succeed. So a lot of attention has been placed on data acquisition and big data, and what the folks at iModerate have seen is there's been a lot more attention placed on actually acquiring that data than figuring out how to use that data. So we're going to shift that focus, we're going to shift that conversation, and it's going to be a great webcast. Just a couple of housekeeping things before we get started. If you have questions along the way, please feel free to click the question button and go ahead and input them. If there are things that we can cover off of as we're going, I will certainly break in and interrupt Adam and ask him those questions. Otherwise, we'll get to those at the end. And if there's questions we don't end up having time for, if you include your name and contact info in the actual question so that we know who asked it, we can reach out with answers later on. About 5-10 minutes after the presentation is done, there will be an archived video of the presentation with the slides and the audio. They'll be available at brandmanagecamp.com on our webcast page, so you can always look at it that way. And then Adam will also be giving his contact info at the end. So if you wanted the actual slides, you could always reach out to Adam, and he can send you those slides as well. So with that, I just want to thank you for taking your time today to spend with us, and I want to hand it over to Adam to get started with the webcast.
Great. Thanks so much, Len. Can you hear me okay?
I can hear you fine.
Perfect. Well, hopefully everyone else can. I'll skip past this vanity slide right here. I am the CMO of iModerate. Been with the company for 11 years since the beginning, and I'm a Boston sports fan living in Denver. So good.
Boo about the Boston part.
I know. But really want to thank you all for taking a few minutes to join me today. I'm going to try and keep it to about 30 minutes so we have plenty of time for Q&A at the end. Want to take a second first and run through what you can all expect in our time together. We're going to start off by taking a look at the state of consumer feedback today. We'll examine how pervasive it is and where it shows up. We'll then explore why, instead of giving marketers insight and a clear direction, consumer feedback often gets left on the cutting room floor or gives us fits. We'll then take a look at some of the places and streams where this feedback resides, its value, and finally, go over some tips to help you start taking advantage of it. According to Gartner, 80% of the world's data is unstructured. So what does that mean? Well, unstructured data usually refers to data that is text-heavy. And so this stat comes as a surprise to many, because when most of us think of all the data out there, we tend to picture this endless sea of numbers. And organizations spend countless dollars and endless hours scrambling to get their hands on all that purchase and behavioral intelligence. Meanwhile, that 80%, the 80% that comes straight from our customers' mouths, gets largely overlooked. And not to dump on numerical data, but its text-based counterpart has the ability to explain, the power to reveal motivations, reasoning, why someone felt a certain way or thought a certain way or acted a certain way. It can be a treasure trove of insight. The trouble is, like with all data, it just doesn't turn into insight on its own. So where is all it coming from? Why do we have a seemingly endless amount of text to wade through? Well, consumers these days aren't exactly shy. Give us a platform, an outlet of some sort, and that's really all we need. And the more opportunities we're afforded to speak out, the more emboldened we become. And the more we say, the more we feel like brands should be listening. Let's look at this through the lens of a pretty ordinary event, dining out. The amount of times in the course of this experience you as the consumer have the opportunity to provide feedback is staggering. So let's say it's Saturday night after a long work week and you've got great dinner plans. You take to Facebook and write a post that you have a reservation at Chez Awesome and you can't wait to try their world-famous mussels. You get there, you're seated, and there's a comment card on the table. Maybe that's kind of old school, but you indulge them and write a line or two about the great service thus far. Maybe you're one of those individuals that's into food porn, so you Instagram and tweet your way through the meal. You go home, and a follow-up survey with open-ended questions is in your inbox. You pronounce your love for Chez Awesome. Now a few hours pass, and as it turns out, the mussels weren't exactly as fresh as they seem. You're sick, and now you're hitting Yelp and OpenTable with reckless abandon. So that's one meal, one experience, piles of feedback. And if you're Chez Awesome, you better be listening. Most brands have this type of customer feedback right at their fingertips. So what's impeding them from having all those insights, all those answers? The marketers and insight professionals we talk to usually fall into one of three categories, and each one carries its own impediments to success. Let's call them the do-nothings, the do-somethings, and the almost theirs. As you might imagine, the do-nothings do just that, usually ignoring the feedback completely. And there's a few common reasons why. Many times, it's just simply overwhelming. The tough questions of where do I start, how do I start, and where do I go take hold. They feel like they can't possibly bite off small chunks, and they throw their hands in the air, or maybe pass it off to an intern to look into. Sometimes the do-nothings don't start because the feedback resides in silos that seem too tough to penetrate. While this might sound far-fetched, I assure you it's not uncommon. For example, we've seen occasions where meaningful streams, such as NPS, only reside in customer experience. Marketing, finance, and ops are all in the dark. Why? Usually it's just an oversight or some logistical sharing hurdle that can easily be remedied. Another reason many do nothing is the noise issue. The feeling is, if they don't know what's relevant and meaningful, then what's the point? Why even start? Finally, the do-nothings often can't envision how to analyze the feedback and utilize the insights. And why go through all that work gathering the bricks to build the house without a blueprint? In contrast to the do-nothings, the do-somethings have taken the plunge, but their technique and approach leaves something to be desired. This group usually focuses on maybe a channel or two, a stream or two, usually the easiest ones. Whatever info is readily available and simplest to digest is what they push forward with, even though it might not necessarily be the most meaningful. And oftentimes their analysis is more of a hand-picking of feedback that just serves to bolster their own point of view. Speaking on behalf of the team of researchers I work with on a daily basis, this is not a best practice. And finally, there are those that are in the game. They are either using some kind of text analytics tool or coding. And while this is a better place to be, it's certainly not devoid of issues. text analytics tools have come a long way, and I'm a huge fan of any technology that makes us more effective and efficient. But while these tools can classify a large volume of responses rapidly, they still fall short when it comes to sentiment, context, and providing an output that's always actionable on its own. A human analyst is really needed to understand underlying relationships and nuance, and ultimately tie the analysis back to objectives and goals. On the other hand, while humans can pick up on nuance and weave a story, we are, after all, still human. So we're going to struggle with bias and subjectivity and fatigue. If any of you have ever coded open ends for more than an hour, you know exactly what I'm talking about. All that said, do coding and rudimentary text tools have their place? The answer is yes, and we'll look at some scenarios later on that are ideal for these methods. But if you're talking about volumes of in-depth feedback that has the power to inform direction and action, then there is a better way. So now we know the issues, and I promise we're just around the corner from some client stories and scenarios. But first I want to talk briefly about the approach behind these examples. From our experience at iModerate, we know our clients need a simple solution, or else they risk falling into the overwhelmed category. And as you can probably tell from the last slide, we aren't buying into the whole man versus machine tug of war. Because the fact of the matter is, figuring out what's noise and what's relevant, and doing so at scale, really takes both. We created Emerge as a way for companies to easily and efficiently navigate the stream of consumer data coming their way, and distill it quickly into something meaningful and actionable. Now, while there are many ins and outs to the process and how it works, at a high level, we use a leading piece of text analytics software to do the heavy lifting, and layer on our qualitative analysts to assign deeper relevance, meaning, and really put the story together. It's powerful software from the minds at MIT Labs, and 11 years of qualitative nuance finding and storytelling wrapped up in one package. With Emerge, we're able to pull in consumer commentary from a variety of sources, whether it be survey verbatims, call center transcripts, social media posts, or product reviews. And in many instances, we can bring those sources together. And what's critically important to our clients is there's no analytical or operational burden, no tool to license, no big salaries to pay. And before I move on, I've mentioned our clients a few times without really providing any context. And you may be asking, is this someone like me? Well, it's truly everyone up and down the marketing suite, from product managers to VPs of marketing. Customer experience professionals also fit the bill, as well as researchers and consumer insight teams. So now that we're all experts on Emerge, let's take a look at a few examples of how we've helped clients leverage the data they already had, specifically in the areas of market research, reviews, social media, and customer support. In some cases, the examples are still under lock and key, and I can't go into a ton of detail. But where I can, I'll highlight the results and the business outcomes. Reliant Energy, an NRG company, is one of many companies Texans can choose to get their energy from. So, like any business where consumers have a choice, loyal customers and promoters are critically important. Reliant's goal was to grow the portion of their customer base that are promoters and reduce the detractors. So they set up a series of customer surveys throughout the life cycle to better understand where the experience was great and where it was tarnished. After launching the initiative, they found that their key metric, NPS, was very unstable. So they started digging into the data even more, and they found some interesting nuggets within the verbatim comments. And yes, I'm referring to open ends, the same ones many marketers don't even bother to read. The problem was they had a hard time proving that these anecdotal findings equated to a business case worth investing resources in. So we jumped in. We started analyzing the open ends every quarter to understand key themes and the magnitude and sentiment of each. That way, we could help Reliant understand what to focus on and start to impact change. So what did Reliant get from the data they already had with our help? A couple of pretty big wins. First, they got alignment across the organization. Understanding what's behind their NPS and the shifts up and down allowed a cross-functional team to get focus. Prior to understanding NPS through Emerge, every team latched on to what they thought was important and fit with their point of view. Now, there's less hypothesizing in silos and more momentum towards a common goal. Next, and this was critically important, they tightened up the breakdowns between sales and services. Expectations are now properly set and managed, leading to higher satisfaction and less customer support work. Reliant was also able to identify trends and mitigate risks. We saw and tracked smaller themes that bubbled up over the quarters. Reliant was able to nip them in the bud before they became a real issue. Finally, they were able to identify root causes. Going through the customer comments and understanding what the true issues are behind customer frustration was key to helping Reliant make operational changes and stop issues in their tracks. Another great source of consumer feedback comes to us in the form of reviews, and there's no shortage of them left on a daily basis. Many companies read these reviews, and in certain industries, are pretty engaged when appropriate. For instance, most of us have seen the back and forth on TripAdvisor between very unhappy hotel guest and apologetic hotel manager. But what often falls by the wayside is looking at reviews as a macro source of insight, and that's a shame. In reviews, you can really run the insight table. You can get a sense of satisfaction, find white space, get the lowdown on features and benefits, and understand the good, bad, and ugly of your customer service. You can also find out how you differ from competitors, what drives a certain rating, and what motivates future purchases. And all this stems from consumer feedback that should be easily accessible to you. Recently, we've looked into product reviews for a few Fortune 500 companies. I can't take you behind the results curtain, but one in particular wanted to understand the anatomy of a star rating. So what constitutes a 2 or a 4 or a 5? Also, they wanted to see how those reviews differ across their competitive set. What I can tell you is the trends that we see just in the language consumers use across different star ratings has far-reaching implications. Not only do you start to really see the sentiment behind those ratings, but you understand the implications very quickly when certain words are used over and over. What also comes out are what those ratings really mean. Does a 4 mean that you definitely have a repeat customer or promoter on your hands? Or is that only reserved for those who give a 5? And how does that differ across the competitive set and by user group? Are repeat customers tougher critics? At the end of the day, reviews tend to carry some of the best fodder out there to analyze. And marketers, insight professionals, and customer experience professionals should be diving in and taking full advantage. On to an example from the wild world of social. I'm sure you all remember Amazon Prime Day. Big idea, big traffic, lots of opinions. Now, many companies are making an effort in this space. And to try and understand consumer sentiment across social networks, they often utilize social media monitoring tools. And while those dashboards provide a surface level look at word frequency and themes, they don't often do a great job at getting under the hood. In this example, we scraped thousands of tweets from the hashtag Prime Day. Now we could also do this with words, so Amazon, Prime, etc. But the volume was such and conversation was so concentrated around this particular hashtag that we chose to focus our efforts that way. To say we found that Prime Day didn't exactly go over well with customers is an understatement. Now, to be fair, Amazon reported that Prime Day exceeded sales numbers by 266% on the same day last year. They also said it got more people to try Prime than any single day in the company's history and provided a gigantic push for their electronic lineup, specifically the Fire Stick and the tablet. But at what cost? When we analyzed the tweets, it was clear that the gap in the expectations set by Amazon and what actually occurred in the consumer's eyes was enormous. Along those lines, consumers mentioned just how overhyped it was. They thought it would be some sort of a Black Friday bonanza, but it fell very, very flat. The deal sold out too quickly. Many complained that the items they wanted were gone within seconds, and those amazing prices they expected, at the end of the day, consumers believed they could find the same deals at Walmart. The whole thing was likened to a horrible garage sale. Even worse, others took to Twitter with the idea that many deals never even existed in the first place. So not only do we have extreme disappointment, but skepticism and eroding trust make a cameo as well. And of course, no big disappointment is complete without its own hashtag. And we at iModerate had a front row seat to the birth of Prime Day Fail as the rallying cry and organizing tag for what many consumers considered an epic fail. At the end of the day, this wasn't noise or irrelevant information, and it wasn't the type of feedback you just want to breeze through and code. It was a growing voice of letdown and distrust, the kind of thing that any company needs to not just hear, but truly understand. The last area we'll focus on is one where clients are increasingly coming to us for answers. It's the world of customer support, and the phone is still king. According to New Voice Media, phones are still the vehicle for around 68% of all contact center communications. And while social seems to get the most attention, it only accounts for about 3% of all contact center communications. Bottom line, the phone is still a critical place to win or lose customers. Now, not unlike reviews, many companies are analyzing this feedback stream already. But for what purpose? Is it to gather macro-level insight into consumer issues and ideas, or just to train and troubleshoot with call center employees? Unfortunately, many times it's the latter. And that's a real missed opportunity because these calls are feedback gold. From the work we've done, we see that the transcripts are often highly emotional and address a clear issue. And unlike social and other forms of feedback, people don't usually pick up the phone for shits and giggles. These calls take time and effort, so it usually means something to the consumer, which means it should mean something to you and your business. Logistically, the only extra step phone work entails is having the calls transcribed, which in today's day and age is about as challenging as finding a Starbucks. Once transcribed, a simple handoff of transcripts is really all it takes to get the ball rolling. Again, I can't speak in detail about the specifics of our client work in this arena, but we've done everything from figuring out why programs are and aren't working, to assigning magnitude and importance to issues bubbling up, to helping clients really understand the competition. And getting back to the idea of phone being feedback gold, it's not uncommon for just a single phone call to cover a tremendous amount of ground. Let's summarize the customer support call from our friend John, pictured here as an example. John just bought a new smart TV, but the problem, as my kids would say, is that it seems to be acting pretty dumb. John calls up support. After the typical intro and disclaimers, John declares that his smart TV is a complete pain. He can't get any web-enabled content to work, which after all was the whole point of him buying this TV in the first place. So here we have clear issue identification and some context, and we're only about 20 seconds into the call. John continues by stating his expectations, that being that this TV was going to be idiot-proof. Yet here he is on a Saturday, spending his day off figuring it all out, instead of playing with his kids. Here, of course, we get a glimpse into John's expectations and the pain caused from them not being met. Later on in the call, John gives us some insight into his perceptions of the competition. He talks about how his neighbor just bought a smart TV too, a Panasonic, and that he said it was super easy to set up. John then drops a customer service bomb as he frustratingly states that he tried reaching the company on Facebook prior to the call, but all he got back was a canned response. Finally, the innovation light bulb goes off as John puts forth the idea of the company having some sort of smart TV for dummies on-screen walkthrough. I think you get the idea. So take this example, add even more emotion and context, and you have a pretty typical phone engagement. Not a bad place to look if you want a wealth of marketing, product, and customer experience insight. So let's say I've done my job, and you're somewhat inspired to take the next step. Well, what is that next step? Besides the obvious answer of throwing it all over the fenced house that I moderate, there is some good preliminary work you can do. First, start with an audit. At what touch points are you collecting feedback, and through what means? If there's not a lot there currently, at what touch points could you be collecting feedback that makes sense? If we're looking at new feedback mechanisms to implement and where to do so, it can really help to map things out based on your customer life cycle and some possible tipping points along the way. Let's go back to Reliant for a minute. They decided there were 4 points they wanted to focus on: when someone becomes a customer, 6 months post-purchase, the renewal period, and when they become dormant. When you understand what streams are in place, or which would make the most sense to implement, now it's time to focus on yield. And not all feedback streams are created equal. We found they usually fall into a few different camps, and figuring this out should help dictate the right approach and next steps. Is there a low volume of responses where the feedback isn't robust? Low volume and shallow in a stream is not a recipe for success with most advanced tech solutions. In this case, a DIY approach might really be the way to go. Is there a ton of feedback in the stream, but the responses are really 1 or maybe 2 words deep? This might be a job for a simple text tool that can effectively generate lists. Is there a lot of volume over a given time, and the feedback is more complex and robust, like in the examples we spoke about today? Well, those are the ones that are prime for an analytics solution. So you know what you have and what the yield is, but what if the playing field is still too large for you? Take a moment to examine which feed might tie directly to a big initiative. Is there a C-level push to improve customer experience? If so, the open ends from customer SAT surveys or your NPS work will probably give you the fastest road to meaningful ROI and buy-in for the next initiative. Is your CMO hell-bent on tracking perceptions of a new product launch? Then maybe digging into what the masses are saying on social around the launch would be the best bet. Point is, you can never go wrong with tying your efforts to those that matter, to the top brass. Another thing to think about is the end game. When you finally have the feedback streams you want to analyze and the right solution or solutions in place, how can you make sure the insights don't die on the vine? It's challenging and not really ideal to lock yourself into an output style without seeing what is what and going through the process. You have to let the insight guide things to some extent. That said, you know your organization better than anyone. You know what sticks and what doesn't. If a 45-page PowerPoint isn't going to get read, then what good is it? To that end, some of our clients just want us to report on top themes. Some want a deliverable loaded with quotes. Others need changes detailed over time. Whatever works for them. Beyond making the output digestible and interesting, think about how you can best share it across departments and functions. One of our clients does it via a town hall style meeting. Others upload it to their intranet or share it in an internal newsletter. These are all things you can think about before your deliverables start rolling in. Just remember, the more you can spread the insights and make them sticky, the better off you'll be. Finally, in getting started, don't neglect the past. Just because you don't have a ton of great feedback today, and maybe you won't tomorrow, doesn't mean that over the past 2 years, it hasn't been building up. Looking back is a great way to start for many companies. Not just to see if that stream is worth analyzing in the first place, but if it is, to give them something to track and measure against as they go forward. So that's all I have for today. I want to thank you so much for taking some time out of your busy schedules to hopefully learn a thing or two that will help you in your day-to-day. And Len, I'd love to open it up to questions and hear what attendees have to say.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you, Adam. I really appreciate it. And there's a lot of great information in there, and I think everybody appreciates. I mean, obviously, you guys have a great tool that you've developed, but also providing that the things that they can look at on their own, I think is incredible. I got a couple of questions here that we've got time to throw out, so I'll do that. And again, if anybody has any other questions, feel free to do so. Just so you know, if you've got to run, this will be available as a recording. You can pass it on to other folks on your team, or if you want to look at it again for some specific information, it'll be available at brandmanagecamp.com on our webcast page in about 10-15 minutes after we close this out. So one question is, when you look at the folks that you're seeing, you kind of broke people into three categories. Where would you say most people are these days? Are they do nothings or do some things or almost theirs? Where are you finding that most organizations are landing?
I think a lot of the big organizations are almost theirs. They realize that just doing nothing in this day and age and not really taking the time to invest in understanding consumers and all the feedback that they're getting in and not dealing with that is probably not the best move for their business. So while they might be overwhelmed at first, they're kind of pushing through it and they're trying different things, but a lot of them don't have that silver bullet yet. In fact, I would say for the most part, that's the people that come to us, or those that are experimenting, those that are coding, those that are using different solutions, and still a lot of insights are getting left on the cutting room floor.
Right. I would imagine there's a fair amount of danger in cherry picking the type of things that you want to look at. I mean, I think your first example with the restaurant, if all you're looking at is the online surveys that you're sending out, or if you're a restaurant, the in-store comment forms or something like that, you would have missed that whole story, right?
Yeah, I mean, listen, as much as you can combine streams and look at the consumer feedback in the aggregate and get kind of a comprehensive read on your customers, the better off you'll be. It definitely comes with its own challenges to bring that all together. It's something that we help a lot of customers do. We feel like if you're hand-picking, or if you're only looking at one thing, or if you're using whatever's in that stream as fodder to back up your point of view, you're doing yourself and your business a real disservice, obviously. And as a research firm, that's something we can't really get behind. And that's some of the hurdles that we help our customers overcome.
Right. So another question is, obviously some of the things you talked about, whether it be Yelp or Facebook and posting pictures of things that or even calling to customer service. I mean, inherently there's a bias in terms of the people who do that versus the people who don't, right? So how do you take that into account in terms of the people who are providing the most feedback may not be completely representative of the entire audience. They just might be the most verbal.
Yeah, no, great point. But I think you've got to look at what your objectives are. Those people that are calling into the service center, those people that are complaining on Facebook, those are your customers, and they're invested in your products, your services, and quite possibly your brand. So it might not be the most representative, group to take a look at for overarching purposes. If you want to stem attrition, if you want to tackle issues that are bubbling up with detractors, taking a look at these streams and identifying what the issues are, the context behind them, is critically important. So really, it just boils down to what your objectives are and then matching the stream, the feedback, the audience to those objectives.
Right. And do you find that this works better in terms of understanding negatives versus positives? Do you find that there's more information out there when people experience problems than people who are happy?
Definitely when you're talking about calls into the customer support center, you don't get a ton of people who take the time out to pick up the phone, unfortunately sit on hold for 5 to 10 minutes just to tell the operator on the other end, the customer service agent, how great the experience was.
Right.
You do see a lot more negative than positive, and the negatives usually have a lot more to say. In terms of reviews, I don't think that's an absolute truth. We do see a lot of reviews that are extremely positive in nature. The consumer knows that other consumers are looking towards those reviews for guidance, so they will take the time to write positive reviews. So it really depends, again, what feedback stream, but I would say, by and large, the negatives usually turn out in droves and usually have to say. Sure.
Right. This is great. I appreciate the information. I appreciate the time that you spent with us, and I know we had a great audience today. I appreciate all the time that you, the folks who have dialed into this, have taken to spend with us this morning. Hopefully you've been able to take away some nuggets that you can use right away to start thinking about how you process and understand and use the information that's available at your fingertips to start building more actionable insights and things that you can take away and do differently. So again, this will be available at brandmanagecamp.com on our website under webcasts, and you can watch it again or pass it along. Brand Manage Camp 2016 will be held September 15th and 16th in Las Vegas. So be sure to check us out, and we'll have that new agenda up in a couple of weeks. And Adam and the folks that I moderate, thank you so much for a great informative session.
Great. Thanks so much, Len. Have a great rest of your day, everyone.
Okay. Take care.
Okay, bye.